The woman standing at my door was holding a small silver pendant on a delicate chain, cradling it in her palm like she was worried it might disappear again. And before I could say a word, she looked up at me and said the simplest possible sentence. "I think this belongs to you." I recognized the necklace before I recognized anything else about her. The small engraved compass face, no bigger than a thumbnail. The chain with the tiny kink near the clasp that I'd always meant to get fixed and never did. The way the silver caught the hallway light and threw it back slightly differently. The way all old silver does. Like it remembers more light than it's currently standing in and is trying to return what it borrowed. Claire had worn that necklace every day for 5 years. Had carried it in my coat pocket for 18 months since she died. And 3 days ago I had realized it was gone. I'd emptied every pocket twice. Checked every surface in the apartment, retraced my steps across 2 days, called the coffee shop on the corner where I remembered last turning it over in my hand while I waited for my order. Nothing. I'd sat on the kitchen floor for an hour, telling myself it was just an object, that Claire wasn't in the necklace, that losing a piece of silver didn't mean losing her again. I'd mostly believed myself. I had mostly been wrong about that. And now a woman I'd never met in my life was standing in my doorway, holding it in her open palm. And there was nothing ordinary left anywhere in the morning. "Where did you find it?" I said. My voice came out rougher than I intended. "A bench," she said, "in Meridian Park. I was sitting there yesterday morning with my coffee and I almost didn't see it." "It was caught between the slats of the bench hanging by the chain." She paused. There was a small tag on the clasp. An engraver's mark with a name and this address. I looked it up. "I hope that isn't—" She stopped. Started over more carefully. "I'm sorry to just show up at your door. I tried the phone number on the tag, but it didn't connect, and I didn't feel right about leaving something like this in a mailbox." I took the necklace from her hand. The weight of it was exactly what I remembered. The specific gravity of something small that has carried an enormous amount of meaning for so long, the weight has changed without anyone deciding to change it. My fingers knew the feel of the chain, the slight warmth the silver held even after a night in a park, the particular texture of the engraved compass face. "Thank you," I said. "I've been looking for this for 3 days. I didn't know if I'd ever—" I stopped because my throat was doing something I didn't want it to do in front of a stranger on a Thursday morning. "Thank you. Genuinely." She gave a small nod, the kind that says, "I understand this is more than a small thing, and I'm not going to require you to finish the sentence." She was already beginning to turn and leave when something made her stop. She turned back, looked at the necklace in my hand, and said, "Can I ask what it is?" "The compass. I've seen one almost exactly like it before, and I've been trying to place where for the last day." That question was the thing. That small, ordinary question that she almost didn't ask, at the end of what she'd expected to be a simple exchange on a stranger's doorstep, was the thing that changed the entire shape of the morning, because I didn't know it yet, standing in my doorway with the recovered pendant warming in my hand. But the answer to where she'd seen one like it was about to open a door between us that neither of us had known was there to open. "My name is Owen Hartley. I'm 34 years old, and I live in the kind of apartment that looks like it was arranged by someone who then left without finishing the job, which is essentially what happened 18 months ago when Claire died. We'd been together 7 years, married for 3 of them, and she had an instinct for making spaces feel inhabited and real and specific to the people living in them that I have never managed to develop on my own. Since she's been gone, I've moved the furniture back to where it was when I first moved in. Not because I prefer it, but because I couldn't stand having things placed by her hands and then slowly disrupted by my careless daily living. The gradual erosion of something that had her intention in it. I work from home designing residential buildings. I make too much coffee and eat cereal for dinner more often than I'd tell most people. And I carry a small silver compass pendant in my coat pocket, the way other people carry photographs, or lucky objects, or the particular weight of someone, who is no longer there to carry themselves, but whose gravity hasn't left the world. You both used to occupy. The compass had been Claire's. She found it at a lost and found at the coffee shop on Green Street. About 5.5 years ago, a few months after we moved into the neighborhood. She'd gone in that morning to collect a forgotten umbrella, and the barista mentioned an unclaimed piece of jewelry sitting in the box, asked if she wanted to look. Claire had held the compass for about 30 seconds, and then asked if she could keep it since nobody had come for it in 3 weeks. She walked out wearing it. I watched her put it on in the coffee shop doorway in the morning light, standing on the sidewalk outside while I waited, and I remember thinking it looked like it had always been there. like the chain had been made for the specific angle of her collarbone. She wore it every day for 5 years. In the morning when she got dressed, at dinner with friends who'd ask about it, and she'd tell them a slightly different version of the story each time depending on her mood. At work, where her colleagues knew it as simply the thing Claire wore the way other people had a watch or a ring. In the hospital toward the end, when she'd stopped being able to wear most things but kept the compass on, because I don't think either of us was ready for it to come off. I took it the morning after she died. I've had it within arm's reach every day since. She used to say the compass was for people who needed to find their way, which she always meant about herself. Not other people. Claire had a private, careful relationship with direction, a quiet uncertainty about her own sense of which way to go that went far deeper than navigating city streets. She wore the compass like a promise she made to herself each morning when she put it on. Keep finding, keep moving. Even when the direction isn't clear, keep moving and trust that clarity will come if you stay in motion long enough to meet it. So I invited the woman in. Her name was Nora Callister. She came inside and stood in the entrance hall with the slight hesitation of someone reconsidering whether they made the right decision in the last 30 seconds, taking in the apartment with the polite, involuntary way people assess an unfamiliar space. The books and stacks near the shelves that hadn't made it onto them yet. The drafting table by the window with a residential floor plan I'd been working on for 2 weeks. The couch where the throw blanket was bunched up from last night instead of straightened, because straightening things alone always felt more pointed than leaving them. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on, and tried to arrange my thoughts into some shape that wasn't just the compass and the strange, specific sensation that the morning had decided to become something other than what it had started as. She took her coffee black, which I noticed because Claire had always taken hers with too much milk, and I'd developed a habit of making 2 cups automatically and standing with the extra one for a moment before remembering. Nora sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around. The mug and I sat across from her, and the compass lay between us on the table like a third person who knew considerably more than either of us and wasn't in a hurry to share it. Where, did you see one like it? I asked. She looked at the compass for a moment before looking at me. My grandmother had one, she said. Almost exactly the same. A silver compass pendant on a fine chain, the face engraved, the same size. She gave it to me when I was 16. I wore it for years. She paused and turned her coffee mug once in her hands. I lost it about 5.5 years ago. In a coffee shop near here, actually. I came in one morning and it was just gone from around my neck. I think the clasp gave way while I was pulling on my coat. I didn't notice until I was 6 blocks away. She looked at the compass on the table again, something working quietly in her expression. I went back twice, filed a lost item report with the shop, checked with them for weeks. Nothing ever turned up. I looked at the compass, then at her. Which coffee shop? She told me the name. I kept my face even, the particular stillness you hold when something is fitting together faster than your expression can track. Green Street, I said. On the corner of Green and Alderton? She nodded. Yes, why? My wife found a compass pendant at the lost and found at that coffee shop, I said. I was choosing the words carefully, trying to lay them down slowly so the shape of what I was saying had time to land. About 5.5 years ago. Nobody had claimed it in 3 weeks. She asked if she could keep it. She wore it every day from that morning until she died. The kitchen went quiet in the particular way it does when something has just changed. Between 2 people and both of them need a moment to understand what shape it changed into. Nora looked at the compass for a long time without speaking. Her expression moved through several things I could see clearly without being able to name precisely. Recognition, something adjacent to grief, and then a third thing. The specific emotion of understanding that something you lost and mourned became treasured and necessary to someone else. Carried every day for years, held with care by hands you will never meet. She looked like someone who has just discovered there was a room they didn't know existed in a house they thought they understood completely. She wore it every single day? Nora said. She never took it off, I said. She called it her direction finder. She said it was for people who needed to know they were still moving the right way, even when they couldn't see where they were going. Nora's eyes moved to the window for a moment, and I let them go. Outside, the city was doing its usual Thursday, cars and pedestrians and all the ordinary forward motion of a morning that didn't know it was anything particular. That's almost exactly what my grandmother used to say about it, she said, her voice quieter than it had been. She'd had the compass since she was in her 20s. She said there was a long period when nothing in her life was going the way she'd expected, and she found the compass at a market and something about it made her believe she'd work it out. She wore it for nearly 50 years, and then she gave it to me because she said I needed it more than she did at that point in things. And then you lost it. And then I lost it. A small, complicated smile. In a coffee shop, of all the possible ways to lose something. She looked at the compass again, and I watched her trying to hold several feelings at once that didn't quite fit in the same space. I kept going back. I thought if I just kept checking, it would turn up. It didn't. Claire went in that same morning for an umbrella, I said. She came home wearing a compass necklace, and I asked about it, and she said someone had lost it and nobody had come back for it, and it felt like it was supposed to be hers. I paused. She might have been right about that. I thought so at the time. We sat with that for a moment. I could see Nora doing the same arithmetic I was doing. The 5.5 years of parallel proximity in which the same object sat on a chain around the neck of one woman living in the same city as the woman who'd lost it, and they had never once been close enough to see what the other was wearing. The same coffee shop on the same corner, almost certainly on the same block more than once over those years, and they had moved through it without ever knowing. I should tell you about the letter. Because the letter is the part that still catches me somewhere beneath the ribs when I let myself think about it directly, and without the letter, none of the rest of what I'm going to tell you makes the same sense. 3 months after Claire died, when I'd finally reached the point where I could open the door to the second bedroom without standing in the hallway, steeling myself for 5 minutes first, I went through her desk. It was the last space in the apartment that was entirely hers, that I hadn't needed to move through in order to live, and I'd been saving it. In the bottom drawer, I found a small wooden box I'd never seen before, tucked behind a folder of receipts. Inside it were a few things arranged with the careful intention of someone who knew exactly what they were keeping and why. A pressed flower from somewhere I didn't recognize. I still don't know where it was from. A photograph of her parents standing in front of a house that no longer exists, taken years before she was born. A stub from the theater for a show we'd seen in the second month of our relationship. When we were both still performing the version of ourselves, we wanted the other person to see and finding it increasingly difficult to maintain. And at the very bottom, a piece of paper folded in thirds, in handwriting I knew the way I knew the weight of the compass. It was a letter she'd begun and never finished. It was dated about 2 years before she died, which meant she'd worn the compass for 3 years before she wrote it. It said, "To whoever lost the compass. I've been wearing it for 3 years now, and I haven't forgotten that it isn't mine to keep. I've thought about you often, whoever you are. I hope you found your way regardless. I've been looking for you slowly in my way without quite knowing how to do it properly. If you ever find me instead of me finding you, please know I wore it with care. I kept it safe. If you want it back, it's yours. But if you've already found your way home without it, I'd very much like to keep finding mine a little while longer." She hadn't signed it. She hadn't sent it. She'd folded it carefully and put it in a box with the things she was keeping. And I found it in a drawer 3 months after she was gone, and sat on the floor of that room for a long time holding it, thinking about what it meant that she'd written it and saved it and never found the person it was for, thinking about the tenderness of a person who wanted to be forgiven for loving something that hadn't been hers to begin with, and who hadn't been able to find the right way to ask. Nora was very still when I finished telling her this. Her coffee had gone almost cold in her hands, and she didn't seem to have noticed. "She was looking for me," she said. Not a question. A statement with something wondering in it. "In her way," I said, "carefully, over time. I think she really did ask at the shop when she first got it. I was with her once when she asked at the counter if anyone had ever described a lost necklace, and they said no. I think she looked in the ways she could think of to look and then wrote a letter to hold the intention when the looking ran out." I paused. "She would have sent it eventually. She just needed to find you first." "She didn't find me in time," Nora said. "She didn't. But the compass found me anyway," Nora said. She looked at the pendant on the table. "A year and a half later, and 6 blocks from where I lost it." That sentence stayed in the air for a moment, and I let it. Because some things need a little space before you can move past them without losing something that should be kept. "She sounds like someone I would have liked enormously," Nora said finally. "She would have liked you," I said. And I meant it in a way that I could be specific about if pressed. Claire had always valued the quality I'd noticed in Nora from the moment she came through the door, which was that she listened with her full attention, rather than with the portion of attention not occupied by preparing her response. She was entirely present in the conversation rather than managing it from a polite remove. "Can I hold it again?" Nora asked. I passed the compass across the table. She turned it in her fingers the way she'd probably turned her grandmother's through all the years she'd had it. The same object, the same weight, the same way old silver holds warmth the moment your skin transfers it. She looked at the back first, where Claire had taken it to a jeweler on our 3rd anniversary and had my name and the apartment address engraved in small letters, saying she wanted it to always know where home was if it wandered off. Then she turned it face up and looked at the engraved compass rose, worn slightly from 5 years of daily contact but still clear in every direction, still pointing. She had it engraved, Nora said. She said she wanted it to know where to come home to. I looked at the compass in her hands. I thought at the time she was talking about the necklace. I think she might have been talking about herself. Nora looked up at me. Our eyes held for a moment that was a little longer than the ordinary length of a glance, the kind of moment that accumulates something without anyone deciding it should. I recognized the expression on her face because I'd felt it from inside. The experience of having too many things to feel about a single situation and not knowing which feeling was the right door to walk through first. We talked for nearly 3 hours, not only about the compass, though we kept returning to it the way you return to the warmest place in a room without consciously deciding to, because there was nowhere warmer to be. She told me about her grandmother, who was 92 and still in the house she'd lived in for 60 years, with a memory precise enough to catalog the location of every object she'd ever owned, and a permanent impatience with people who couldn't say clearly what they meant, a trait that had apparently been consistent since she was in her 40s. We talked about Claire, the parts I can talk about without my voice doing things outside my control, and some of the parts where it did them anyway and I let it, because Nora didn't make the specific face that most people make when someone cries unexpectedly in front of them. She just waited without either reassurance or visible discomfort, which meant I could come back from it faster and more cleanly than I usually manage. She told me she was a restoration librarian, that she spent her days repairing damaged books, the bindings, the pages, the spines, the various mechanisms by which books hold themselves together well enough to be read, returning them to a state where they could do what they were made for. She said it with the low, specific devotion I recognize in people who have found the right work for the right reasons and are quietly aware of it. I told her about designing residential buildings, that what I actually spent most of my time thinking about was the way internal space affected how people felt without their ever knowing the space was the cause. She said that sounded like architecture and book restoration were the same underlying impulse in different forms. I thought about it honestly and said I thought she was right. Sometime after noon, she said she had things she needed to get back to. I walked her to the door and we stood in the hallway with the specific uncertainty of 2 people who have had a more significant conversation than either of them arrived intending to have, and are not entirely sure what the protocol is after. Something like that. The compass, I said. I was still holding it, had picked it up from the table when we stood. I want you to take it. She shook her head. It has your wife's engraving. It has your grandmother's 50 years, I said. And yours. And whatever Claire meant to it is in the letter she wrote, not in the silver. I held it out toward her. She was trying to give it back to you. She just didn't find you in time to do it. Let me finish what she started. Nora looked at the compass in my hand for a long, specific moment. Then she reached out and closed her fingers around it the way she'd held it when she arrived, carefully, like something that had proven it could disappear and deserved to be treated accordingly. Thank you, she said. Thank her, I said. She kept it safe for 10 years waiting for someone to return it. She looked at me and I looked at her, and the afternoon had become something that neither of us had been walking toward when we woke up that morning, which I've come to understand is usually the precise shape that the things which end up mattering most take. You don't move toward them knowing what they are. You move toward them thinking you're doing something small and ordinary, returning a lost thing to its owner, opening a door for a stranger, answering a question you didn't know was going to pull the morning inside out. She left, and I heard the elevator doors open and close at the end of the hall. I stood in the doorway for longer than I needed to, feeling the specific quality of the apartment after. It has had someone in it who made it briefly feel like a place where things were happening rather than a place where a person was continuing to learn how to live without someone. I went back to the kitchen. I stood at the counter for a moment before doing anything. I looked at the 2 coffee cups on the table, still where we had left them. I thought about the letter in the wooden box in the drawer in the 2nd bedroom, the sentence she'd written and saved and never sent. If you ever find me instead, please know I wore it with care. Someone had found her, I thought. just slightly later than she'd written that sentence and in a way she wouldn't have planned, but found all the same. The compass had done what compasses are supposed to do. It had pointed home by a route nobody anticipated and arrived. Nora texted me 4 days later. She'd shown the compass to her grandmother, who had held it for a long time without speaking before asking to hear everything about the woman who'd worn it. Her grandmother had listened to all of it with her eyes closed. And when Nora finished, she'd opened them and said, in the direct and entirely unsparing way of a woman who had been on Earth long enough to have earned the right to say exactly what she saw, "You should go back and see that man." The compass found its way home. That doesn't mean it's finished with its work. I read the text twice. Standing at the kitchen counter where 2 people had sat that morning piecing together a decade of overlapping history over coffee that went cold before either of them noticed. I wrote back, "I think your grandmother is right," she replied in under a minute. "She usually is. Saturday?" I replied, "Saturday. If you have ever lost something that mattered and stopped believing it would be found, and then had it returned to you by the exact right stranger at the exact right time, you will understand what I mean when I say I didn't quite believe in the morning when it started. It felt ordinary right up until it stopped feeling ordinary, and then it felt like something that had been slowly arranging itself for years, though arranged isn't quite the right word. Not arranged, more like arrived at. The way certain things arrive when enough time has passed for all the moving parts to find each other. A compass worn for decades. A clasp that gave way on a morning someone wasn't paying attention. A woman who asked to keep something unclaimed and wore it until she couldn't. A man who carried it in a pocket for 18 months until it slipped through the slats of a park bench, into the hands of the person who'd lost it. Nobody arranged any of it. It just moved. The way things move when they are trying to find where they belong. Patient and steady and certain. The way a compass needle is always certain, pointing in one direction through whatever weather is happening around it, waiting for whoever is holding it to trust what it's pointing toward, and finally, after all the hesitation, simply start walking.